Hello and welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Bajo.
And I'm Hex. This week we head back to Gotham City for Bruce Wayne's early days as the Dark Knight in Batman Arkham Origins.
It's high time you realize that you are a man, not an island.
Also this week, there's a wolf among us in the latest point-and-click from Telltale.
Mirror, mirror, if you're able, tell me all about this fable.
Plus that protective parental gene kicks in as you keep your young badgerlings safe in shelter.
And Goose looks back at the life of an adventurous hero. But first, can you guess the game for this week?
What was that?
Certainly one of the more weird guess the games we've had. But before we move on, I think there's another game that we need to absolutely talk about, and that's Pokémon X and Y. We've been playing it over the last few weeks for Spawn Point, and I have to say, I'm impressed with how much fun it is.
Yeah, me too. I think this is probably the biggest leap for the series, both technically and gameplay-wise, since Gold and Silver over 10 years ago.
For starters, this is the first time we've seen 3D character models in Pokémon. It's also the first time you can move your character diagonally instead of just walking on a grid. I know these features seem like no-brainers, but it's finally pulled the series out of the 90s, and it's about time. I have to say though, the stereoscopic 3D is a bit rubbish. It's only available half the time, and when on, causes some significant frame rate drops, particularly in battle. Personally, I'm never a fan of turning the 3D on anyway, but I think it's a bit disingenuous of the developers to spruik it as a feature when it's essentially broken.
At the end of the day, the game is still fundamentally Pokémon. But the technical and gameplay updates have rejuvenated the series for a jaded old Pokemaniac like me.
I think if you're new to Pokemon, it's the perfect place to start. And you can see our full review over on Spawn Point this weekend. But Hex, right now, I've got me some news to read.
Good game.
30-year-old Caitlin Oliver of Chicago, Illinois, has become the first woman since 1984 to set a world record in an arcade game. Caitlin set a score of just over 493,000 points in Namco's classic beat-em-up Splatterhouse, shattering the previous record of 373,000 points. Nintendo has officially stopped production of its Wii console in Japan and Europe. The little console originally launched in 2006 and went on to create a motion control craze. During its life, the Wii sold over 100 million units, making it the best-selling console of its generation and the 5th best-selling console of all time. The Australian Interactive Games and Entertainment Association has released its yearly Digital Australia report, analysing Australian gaming habits. The report shows that 71% of households now have 2 or more gamers, while 98% of households with children have computer games. It also showed that 47% of gamers are female, the average Aussie gamer is 32 years old, and over 80% of parents play games. And now over to the Esports desk. Sports. First up in racing news, Madison Down has won the race to Reality Grand Final, competing against 15 of Australia's best sim racers in R-Factor. After winning all 3 rounds and claiming the top prize, Down has earned himself a spot in the real-life Aussie Racing Car Series, to be held later this year. And the final event of the year for the Australian Cyber League Pro Circuit was held in Sydney, with players facing off in tight competition over Call of Duty Black Ops, StarCraft 2 and League of Legends. League of Legends saw New Blood Team NV, formerly Wobbly Bears, battling Team Immunity. Immunity came back strong after losing the first game in an epic 50-minute grind. They eventually closed out the championship 2-1. The COD Black Ops Grand Final battle between Team Trident and Immunity was extremely tight, with regular lead changes. But a clutch kill streak from Immunity's Naked held off the challengers. StarCraft 2 saw a field full of strong players and upsets, but the Grand Final matchup saw King Kong, a Korean student, convincingly school his rival Pig in the way of the Zergling.
And GG! King Kong takes it 3-0!
A humble winner, he'll spend his prize winnings on a car to get himself to uni. Congratulations to all the competitors and winners.
Good game.
I didn't know anything about Shelter when I loaded it up. It was just referred to around the office as the Badger game. And it is a game about badgers, but it's also much more than that.
You begin your life as a mother badger in your cozy badger den, with 5 baby badgers in your care. Their soft whimpers immediately cry hunger, but you notice one weak, pale-looking baby who can't get up.
Sniffing around your home, you find a buried turnip which is just enough to rouse the youngster to life, and thus begins your journey out into the wild. You set off into the dangerous world, babies in tow, in search of more turnips.
This opening sequence is pretty much all you need to feel emotionally attached and wholly responsible for your 5 little badgerlings. You can run quite fast, but the babies struggle to keep up, and their little whimpers and barks are pretty cute.
Yeah, some kind of protective parental instinct just kicks in, doesn't it? But once outside, I was also struck by the beautiful art and design of this game. Pale, earthy tones, a cool kind of geometric style, as if everything had been cut out of paper. And the way they tie that into the environmental and weather changes is just charming.
Great music and sound design too. Forest sounds are complemented with a subtle orchestral score of percussion, minimal piano and guitar. There's a lovely little guitar strum that plays whenever one of your cubs finishes eating something. And it just provides that little extra element of gamer progression and achievement.
Yeah, it's subtle, but it reinforces your purpose, doesn't it? Plus, all those little animal sounds are so cute, the little snuffles and grunts and things.
You really do get fully immersed in the world of being a small animal.
Yeah, you do. At first, you gleefully frolic about the field, sniffing out veggies, rodents, and frogs for your young'uns to eat. But life's not all a walk in the park for these guys. Baby badgers have the misfortune of looking rather tasty to predators.
Yes, there's all sorts of nasty creatures out there that would like to make a meal of them. Birds, sinister creatures in the night, and if you don't keep all your babies well fed, they might starve and pass out.
Yeah, on my first playthrough of this, I didn't realise that you had to make sure each individual cub had enough food, so when navigating this nightfall section, 2 of them fainted. Now, the idea of this level is to make sure your cubs stay in the light, or they'll get eaten. But with 2 down and no food around, I had to leave them to go and find some, and so one didn't make it. Oh, it was awful, Bajo.
The moment you lose your first one, it's pretty heart-wrenching, isn't it? You just feel like a bad parent.
Yeah, I was crying, no, I'm so sorry, I failed you.
Circle of life.
That whole level is so stressful too, because if they get spooked by the snap of a twig, they all run off into the darkness. And that moment of panic as you try to find them in the dark before disaster strikes is just terrifying. It's amazing that a simple little game like this made me feel so anxious.
Continuing on your journey, your cubs will grow the more you feed them. If you're sneaky and quick, you can even snatch a fox for them to feast on together. Feast, my babies. Grow big and strong.
It's funny how you have no remorse for the fox either. It's all about your children. I mean, that's the law of the jungle. Eat or be eaten.
That said, predators are one thing, but even the land turns against you. Oh, these poor little guys just can't catch a break.
Yeah, I played through this a few times, but I never managed to make it to the end with more than 4 babies. There's a river rapid section that I always lose one on, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. But even still, I loved every moment of it. I loved that protective nature it brought out in me. I loved caring for my little cubs, turning around and feeling that relief as I saw them bounding along after me. Plus, all the design choices perfectly complemented the experience, so I'm giving it 8.5.
I loved how different this game was, and it goes to show that with the right elements, even a little game about badgers can be an emotional experience. It's easy to recommend this. It's appropriately priced for a short woodland adventure. I'm giving it 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
If I really think about it, I grew up with 2 brothers, right? So we would all huddle around the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, right, and play together. Actually, that's not true. We would fight and punch each other for the control and who get to play next, and delete each other's games when we were mad. But I think the first game that not only stuck with me, but it was like my brothers too. Like we still remember it fondly and still talk about it. Was probably Chrono Trigger on Super Nintendo. Man, we played through that thing in like together we're like trying to decide like, you know, what we should do and where we should go and which characters we were going to use and level up. And there were so many endings that you could replay over and over and over again, and it had that cool New Game Plus system. And it was like time travel, and nobody's ever really done like I think a really cool time travel game since. Like whenever I think of a time travel game, I instantly think of Chrono Trigger. That game and the characters and just kind of the dream team of developers that worked on it, that made an impression on me very early on in the Super Nintendo era, and I think it's stayed with me my entire life.
There is no more happily ever after in Fabletown, a not-so-magical part of New York City, inhabited by some of the most iconic characters ever to grace the pages of our favorite fairy tales.
105 today again if you missed it, a record for the date. Hottest ever in June, 103 now, and that humidity looks low, but remember, the hotter the air is, the more moisture it can hold.
Leave me alone!
I'll see you around.
Once living in 1,000 separate kingdoms spread over 100 magic worlds, characters such as Snow White, Ichabod Crane, Beauty and her Beast, and Mr. Toad are now just trying to survive day to day.
There are fables that are struggling worse than I'd imagined.
They escaped Neverland following an event known as the Exile.
The Wolf Among Us is adapted from Bill Willingham's Fables comic book series. And along with the story, this distinctive art style really draws you in. You play Bigby Wolf, famous for his former huffing and puffing habit, but he's now reformed and has become the sheriff of Fabletown, in charge of keeping order amongst the fairy tale community.
Bigby is about as film noir as you can get. He smokes, he frowns, he even has the tiny, messy apartment with nothing in the fridge.
Why do I even own this?
Yet beneath all that is a very capable and intelligent character who just wants to keep peace in his community.
Yes, until you get him angry, and you won't like him when he's angry. Bigby's skills of deduction and the delicate political balance of Fabletown are put to the test when a particularly gruesome murder seems to send a message. And so begins your investigative adventure.
This chapter, titled Faith, is the first of 5 which will be released over the next few months. It's a good setup and introduction to a world that has depth and is quite interesting. I have to say, I'm not big into the whole urban fairy tale setting, but I liked these characters have to deal with real-world problems like alcoholism and financial hardship.
Yeah, me too. And this is from Telltale, who did the Walking Dead series. And while I am a fan of that series now, I still think their first episode wasn't very strong. But with The Wolf Among Us, I think Telltale has learned from that experience and given this a stronger hook to pull you through. It's a mystery that I need to see resolved.
Yeah, I think having that crime to solve will definitely keep players coming back for each new episode. You really do play the investigator, looking around, picking up on little details and building a list of suspects.
You sound so sure that he's guilty.
I don't know if he is. That's why I need to talk to him.
Like all good mysteries, there's even a plot point you don't see coming.
As much as I enjoyed the story though, Hex, I do still struggle with this type of gameplay. I just have a limit with this kind of thing, and Telltale always know exactly how to push that limit. That fixed camera position, the interaction wheel, and the quick time events just get a bit frustrating. So I'm glad this is delivered in just 2-hour chunks. I just personally don't think I could spend a whole weekend playing a game like this.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with it. I think for this kind of storytelling, the devs have made the right choice. And there's just something about solving a whodunit with a point-and-click mechanic that just works so well.
Fingerprints?
They'll be on the grip and the trigger.
I played through this a few times just to see how my choices affected the story, and the smallest decisions really do make a difference.
There are some big moments in this game, which I liked, but once again, just because of the interaction you have with it, I didn't feel that involved in what was going on. Chasing a suspect where your only action is to duck left or right, or spamming A repetitively to push someone off you just didn't build the suspense in the way I think they were hoping to. But it does look great, and those big bold colours and the shadows and lines are just beautiful. I do wish it ran a bit smoother though. We played this on 360, and it's only a small download. But it just seemed to stutter along a bit, and the loading times were long enough for me to go take bathroom breaks.
Hey, stop!
Yeah, I will agree with you there. It can break the flow a little when you're deep into conversation with Snow White or Mr. Toad, making decisions and listening closely, and then there's that awkward pause where you're just looking at each other.
If you're gonna say something, out with it.
Wait.
You know, that kind of thing just pulls you out of the moment.
The performances are so strong though. I think the voice acting here is better than all of the Walking Dead games. They all just sound like how you imagine when you read the comics.
You're not as bad as everyone says you are.
But we should wrap this up. Final thoughts, Hex?
Man, Telltale just keep getting better and better at creating point-and-click adventure games. I'd even go so far as to say they're leading the industry in this genre. I'm giving it 8.5.
Yeah, I think they're getting much better at them with each iteration, but I still feel like they're just a bit too passive for me to completely connect, so I'm giving it 7.
While we're on the subject of point-and-click, Goose takes a look at one of its all-time great characters.
He's the wannabe pirate of the Caribbean with the pixelated puffy shirt who can hold his breath for 10 whole minutes. Guybrush Threepwood, this is your extra life. From the moment you stepped onto Mealy Island to pursue a dream of becoming a mighty pirate, your life took a sudden turn towards the absurd, but not without adventure.
I want to be a pirate.
You started by vanquishing the dreaded 3 trials: sword mastery, thievery, and treasure huntery, graduating with flying colours in the art of insult sword fighting, overcoming your irrational fear of porcelain to steal the idol of many hands, and uncovering the legendary lost t-shirt of Mealy Island. It was during this premiere quest that you would meet the love of your life, Governor Elaine Marley, and it was her subsequent kidnapping that doomed you to meet your greatest adversary, the ghost pirate LeChuck, where you came face to face with the dark powers of voodoo and the second biggest monkey head you've ever seen.
That's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
Thanks to the power of your spacious pantaloons, capable of stashing anything from a giant cotton bud to a duck, you were able to solve any problem that would come your way, preventing the evil LeChuck from taking Elaine's hand in marriage as his demon bride. In the process, you wooed Miss Marley into accepting your own offer of matrimony, though you didn't get off to the happiest start by proposing with a cursed diamond that transformed her into a solid gold statue. We all know gaining a trophy wife was never your intention. Of course, your career on the high seas was never smooth sailing, but your plucky perseverance saw you through. Well, that is until LeChuck skewered you with the cursed cutlass of Carflu,
Elaine?
killing you and sending you to the dreary underworld. But not one to let death get you down, you overcame your darkest moment thanks to the power embedded in your wedding ring. The pure love of your bond with Elaine was enough to return you to the land of the living. Guybrush, you may never have learned the true secret of Monkey Island, but your courageous deeds over such a long and spectacular career have written you into the pages of legend, because you're a hero we just click with.
Good game.
Batman is a complex superhero, and his long and dark journey has been explored in so many different ways. But at the core of Batman is that symbiotic struggle with the Joker, and in Batman Arkham Origins, they get to start that very dance.
Tell me something, dear. Have you ever had a really bad day? You of all people should know. There's nothing so cruel as memory.
The game is over, Joker.
Inescapable, unrelenting.
Why do you do what you do?
This will be the fight of your life.
Because I made a promise.
Now this is what I call a party! How many lives did you just take?
Newsflash! I'm the one who's trying to kill you! You can't even escape into madness!
It's Christmas Eve, and the villain Black Mask has hired 8 assassins to try and kill the Batman. Facing off against baddies like Deathstroke, Killer Croc, and a now female Copperhead gives us and Batman a chance to get to know some of these great villains a little bit more. And I think it's safe to say Bats is in for a long night.
Origins is a prequel. Batman has only been on the job for 2 years. He's undisciplined, angry, unforgiving, and unwilling to compromise.
You want to see what 250 beats per minute feels like?
I've never seen Batman this violent before, Hex, and it was kind of confronting, and also he's always surrounded by the death of innocence, and that seems to fuel his rage. We recently spoke to Eric Holmes, creative director on the game, and he spoke about why they chose to go with a younger Batman.
Getting into the prequel territory was something that really excited us, because what we could do is Rather than telling another story of Batman, we could tell a transformative story for him, something where he really has to undergo a significant change. He really has to face a very significant enemy. Whilst it's very familiar, whilst the setting is familiar and the characters are somewhat familiar, we can refresh everyone through going through that prequel lens, because the press have never had a picture of him. And the people that do know that he's real really very much regret encountering him, because the day that he met them, that day wasn't a good day for them. Batman has not yet become the character that we know he will, but through the events of the story, he grows and he develops and he starts becoming that character.
You're outmatched by these assassins.
What?
You're not some hardened vigilante. You're a young man with a trust fund and too much anger.
This really is Gotham City at its worst, and Bats is just trying to hold it all together. The police cannot be trusted. They're just as corrupt as the criminals. You really do feel like a lone wolf most of this game, even when you're talking to Batman's most trusted friend, Alfred the Butler.
Alfred, who do you see when you look at me? The boy whose shoes you used to tie every morning? The teenager you drove to his first date?
You know, I feel like there's a lot that could have gone wrong with this game. And the first hour is very much more of the same and a little underwhelming, so I was worried. You know, it's got big shoes to fill.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's new voice actors for Batman and for the Joker, and I was very worried about that.
I think he's talking to you.
But Troy Baker, who you might know as Joel from The Last of Us, or Booker DeWitt from Bioshock Infinite, does a stellar Joker.
You really don't want to know.
It's both an homage to Mark Hamill's long-running interpretation, but with Baker's own spin on it.
I've killed a lot of people.
And as much as I missed not having the master Kevin Conroy, who's voiced Batman in the last 2 games and about a billion other things, I gotta say, Roger Craig Smith nailed it. And after a while, I completely forgot that it was a whole new Batman.
Boss, where's he going?
Yeah, all my worries were cast aside. Once I'd got through that opening section and settled into the Bat groove, the game really starts to find its feet. Origins City is twice the size of Arkham City, with a bridge connecting North and South Gotham. Buildings are much taller, but it still somehow feels very similar to the tightly knit Arkham City. I did enjoy stopping the odd crime though, and there's plenty of puzzles and side missions.
Another day, another door. They're just no match for you.
Gotham just felt a bit empty to me though. I mean, I know it's Christmas Eve and everyone's meant to be home tucked up in bed, but I don't know, I was a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, I was excited to be in Gotham City finally, but it's not the Gotham City I've dreamed about exploring. It's very much a hub world between objectives. You do spend most of your time indoors though, and those missions more than make up for it, I think. You're pulled through at a solid pace through the 13 or so hour campaign, with a perfect drip feed of gadgets and abilities to complement the growing complexity of the environmental puzzles.
The core gameplay hasn't changed a great deal on the surface, but it feels a lot more refined. Batman's counters are as sophisticated as ever, and it's such a joy watching him flip about seamlessly through big fights. And it felt like there were more of those double counters where you take out 2 goons at once. I'm still wowed by how reactive those animations are, and I really like that you have so many gadgets to start with. You can go from Arkham Asylum to City to Origins without feeling like you've taken a step backwards, because it's the same gadget, just earlier tech.
Yes, this Batman is very much a work in progress, both psychologically, but also in his suit construction and the Batcave. I think most of all, they've really stepped up the combat this time around. There are just so many fights. And they were much more challenging this time around, with more aggressive goons and combat variables for you to worry about on the fly. And many of them I was still thinking about hours later.
I still struggle with the controls on a few occasions in some of those fights though, Bajo.
Yeah, me too.
Especially with those quickfire gadgets. But I do think they teach you to be a better Batman in combat.
Yeah, and I think they do a better job of letting you know what's going on within a fight around you, such as the click of a gun, knowing that you need to take that out quickly, or the red counter indicator that you can't avoid. I also found myself quick-firing batarangs a lot more in combat now, which is the way it should be.
That sticky concussion grenade was a favourite of mine for delayed incapacitation of enemies in a fight. But nothing can match the carnage of the shock gloves. You can tell they thought hard about enemy combinations too. It's not just room after room of more goons. There are times when you'll wonder, how will I ever get through this?
You're a dead man!
It's balanced combat. You feel awesome as Batman, but never overpowered.
The boss fights were a bit of a mixed bag though. Bane's stuff was incredible. But then others, like the one with Firefly, didn't really play to the strengths of the game, I thought.
There's more of a focus on detective work too.
This bullet was fired from a revolver. Ballistics analysis indicates a low angle of trajectory. The shooter could have been someone of Penguin's height.
You'll reconstruct a scene and try to figure out what's happened. It only occurs a handful of times in the main story, but it's a fun storytelling mechanic, and I hope future games explore this detective side of Bats a little bit more.
Yeah, me too. It must be hard to balance action with puzzles and things like that in a game like this. But it's a good mix. There were a few confusing level design issues though, and I did get a bit sick of going into Detective Vision so much, and I think maybe slightly more obvious level design cues might be a better way for the series to go. But I like that you're not always presented with the answer, and you do have to look around a bit. I thought the shadowing and colour palette was really interesting.
Yeah, I think the dark parts were even darker than Arkham City, if that's even possible. But it means you notice it more when they work colour in there, which is nice. I think what I like most about this game, though, is how everyone underestimates each other. Some fear Batman, some haven't heard of him.
What are you?
Some know him well.
I'm saying you, Batman.
And Bats underestimates who he's going up against constantly.
What did you do to me?
You know what, it's just fun watching all of that play out.
For me, this was all about the Joker. There are some truly incredible moments with him as a young, fresh, and completely insane villain. And Origins has some of the best cutscenes I've seen in a long time. Also new to the franchise is multiplayer. It's Joker's gang versus Bane's gang versus the dynamic duo Batman and Robin. A 3 versus 3 versus 2 matchup brought to us by developer Splash Damage, who are known for the Enemy Territory series. It's a dark game mode, but it needs to be because when you're playing as Batman or Robin, you need to rely on the shadows to survive and pick your targets carefully.
Yeah, you can always tell a newcomer Batman or Robin because they just walk into a fight.
Robin's sighted.
It's quite terrifying though, seeing Batman creeping about and hearing the flap of the cape.
Yeah, I've never quite felt the fear of being a goon before quite like this. There's unlocks and gadgets and many takedown strategies to play with on all sides. I liked it, Hex. It's not something I'll come back to a lot, but at least it's not tacked on. It feels balanced and thought out.
All in all, Origins does play it pretty safe on the single-player side of things, but there's no series exhaustion here, and I think they've done a fantastic job of dealing with the important Batman subject matter. You know, it's great to be back doing that signature Batman strut, so I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10.
I think for me, I finally enjoy this combat fully. I've always been a little bit on the fence with something so counter-heavy. I just wish there were more superhero games with this level of polish and commitment, and I'm so happy that this isn't a stopgap or a filler game. It's a Batman chapter in its own right. I'm giving it 9.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game.
So, did you guess the game for this week? It's just there. It was EnviroBear 2010. An HD re-release of EnviroBear 2000, you play as a bear driving a car in a race against time to eat as much fish as possible before winter sets in. And it's our Guess the Game for this week because it had badges in it. Eh?
And we just wanted to show it. Next week, Crytek try their hand at free-to-play with Warface. What could that be about, Hank?
You, gentlemen, are Warface.
And we take to the high seas in the piratical adventure of Assassin's Creed 4.
All hands aft, lads.
And don't forget, you can catch Good Game Pocket Edition Saturday nights right here on ABC2, where we answer all of your questions.
Well, gaming-related questions.
Yes.
We can't just answer any old questions.
No.
Except about cats. Till next time, may all your games be good ones. Hex out.
Bajo out. Or about how to install your very own bidet.
Which you've done recently.
I have.
Yep. Tell us about that.
Well, most of all, I'm impressed with his accuracy.